This question is for Dr. Mercer, Dr. Greenfield, and Mr. Vaughn. In a review of the business case for diversity, the president of the National Minority Supplier Development Council testified that diverse supply chains are better equipped to address consumer preferences in a direct way. She also added that diverse firms tend to hire diverse workers at a much higher rate. With that, we found that some of the banks did not even track their spending with diverse firms. With that said, what would you recommend banks have a public database on their website to increase transparency? That can be a yes or a no. How can organizations continue to work with other organizations like the Chamber of Commerce for LGBTQ or the National Veteran Supplier Diversity? Go. Dr. Mercer?
Chairwoman Beatty, we encourage our banks to have supplier diversity, and we also encourage them to collaborate with a variety.
Okay, transparency on their website, yes or no?
Yes, because
Mr. Vaughn, transparency on their website, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Ms. Berry, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Dr. Greenfield, yes or no?
I'd like to see that at the discretion of the particular organization.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
I think we would leave that up to the firms. I think a lot of firms do that.
Okay. Ms. Ella Halaby?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much. The next question deals with Section 342, as several of you have mentioned, the Dodd-Frank Act, which we know established OMWI, and they charged them with increasing inclusion and diversity with their workforce. They charged them with increasing participation of women and minority-owned businesses in their agency, and also to assess diversity policies and practices of the industries that they regulate. Mr. Vaughn, how important is the data collection process in measuring D&I? I believe it's difficult to measure what we don't track.
It's absolutely critical, whether you're looking at supplier diversity or talent acquisition and the makeup of boards or leadership teams. Disclosure is certainly, as my fellow witnesses have said, brings transparency and increases performance. What gets examined and measured gets done.
We also know that, for example, FDIC and OCC did it on a voluntary basis, and their assessments were as low as 16% and 9%. Mr. Benson and Dr. Mercer, why do you believe the response rates from your members to regulate are so low?
So we do have a number of members who do tell us that they respond to it. We interpret the statute, our members interpret the statute as actually being a discretion, not a mandate. And we do know we have members who raise concerns because while EEOC data, which all members have to supply, has a FOIA protection. 342 data may not have a FOIA protection, and firms are concerned about confidentiality risks that would come from that.
Thank you. The president of the National Minority Supplier Development Council testified in one of our hearings that diverse supply chains are better equipped to address consumer preferences in a direct way. Despite this review of the bank supplier diversity, members from the subcommittee still showed that not all of our nation's largest banks track this data or track their business partnership with diverse asset management, something you're going to hear a lot about in looking at that. Mrs. Berry, can you tell us why you think some banks do not track their diverse supplier and how much they spend, and why banks who handle hundreds of billions of dollars in assets do not have or do not track their partnerships with diverse managers? And Ms. Greenfield will ask you that same thing.
I believe that the banks are challenged by that data because the data doesn't look good, and when it doesn't look good, they're not willing to share that data. That's as simple as that. But the second piece is where they do gather that data. One of the things that the best practicing banks are doing is they're requiring their diverse suppliers or all of their suppliers to also monitor their own diverse sub-suppliers and subcontractors.
To anyone, why do you think they don't have diverse asset managers? We now know through our studies that there are many minority diverse asset managers that can do it, but we're finding out that was an aha moment for many of the banks. Why? Anyone?
Supplier diversity still remains not a top-line priority for the organizations. Once they make the commitment, they'll change the results.
Thank you, and my time is up.